Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode 14 of Priestessing the Priestesses. We're excited today, Kohenet Matan, my co-host, and myself, Kohenet D'vorah Grenn, to welcome Rabbi Cherina Eisenberg to today's broadcast. And she is going to tell us many exciting things about self-care and pleasure and a whole host of things. Your background is so impressive and you wear so many hats, Cherina, that I'm not even going to attempt to describe everything you're doing, because I also might be wrong and I might be bringing up things you're no longer actively doing. So I'm going to turn it over to you as soon as I just do this, because we were laughing at how this looks. And yes, looks like spirit is entering the room, and as Andy said, we don't need filters from Zoom if we have the sun behind us. So again, welcome, Cherina, and I turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. So a little bit about me. I became a rabbi through Aleph, Jewish Renewal, and my background is in the arts, the performing arts primarily, and also besides dance and music and theater that I'm so passionate about. I also have a culinary certificate, and I do healing and nourishing foods, plant-based primarily, and I also happen to be an energy healer. So I wear a lot of different hats. You are absolutely right. And my real passion is education, and just to share and to create sacred containers where people can blossom and feel like they can truly just come out of their shell and share the brilliance within them. And because of that, I created a business that is called Hot Pink Torah. Pink being one of my favorite colors, as you may be able to tell. And it's all about the revelation of you. So this is not the traditional, kind of Jewish learning where it's what did the rabbi say years ago? How do we follow all the rules? It's not about delving deep into text and just reading and reading and reading until you still have no idea what's going on. But it's really about looking within. So this is about looking within to see the Torah that wants to emerge and where your divine spark, just how it wants to show up in this world through your body in your life. And it is so much fun because I see radiant, smiling faces at the end of my programs, and to just know that there's this positive energy going out in the world that thrills me.
Of course. Sounds wonderful. What a rewarding life.
Yes.
Sure, it brings you a lot of joy. Yeah. Wonderful. So where do we
I just wanted to say that Cherina and I were in a class together, and so that's sort of our connection was, I think it was the weddings class, right? Practical, the practicum.
No, it was a Hasidut class, actually. I believe it was a Hasidut class. Yes, and that was my very first rabbinical school class that I ever took. And you were one of my favorite people in it, because I felt like I could talk to you about all these mysterious, Kabbalistic, beautiful things, and you just got it on such a deep level. So I remember that. Yeah.
I forgot that was the class, and we reconnected recently because Cherina said, I want to talk about pleasure, and where in Judaism do we talk about pleasure? And we had this really beautiful, afterwards I thought, unfortunately offline, conversation, because it was really generative and inspiring. And in that conversation, I said, Cherina, you have to come on Priestessing the Priestesses so we can keep talking about pleasure. So that's, and we were on Purple Honey, Jody Bayless's show, which is, now I'm not going to remember the subtitle, but like Divine Feminine and Women and Spirituality and Judaism. And we were on the same episode about mezuzot. So it's very different angles about this ritual object that goes on the doorpost, or other ways of looking at it. So it's been neat to be circling around each other and to finally have you here. So I wanted to make that personal grounding connection.
Thank you.
So where would you like to start? you were talking about a couple of things before we went on camera, Cherina, so I'll let you decide where you'd like to start.
Ooh, well, that's the invitation. I would just like to start with a tiny bit of some hip circles. If you are willing to join me in this, just to let our bodies start to move. One of the things that can happen, and it keeps us in our heads, unfortunately, too much, which can cause a lot of stress, is that we stop moving and we're just focusing on the computer and thinking. And when we get into our hips, there's a new level of grounding and presence that starts to emerge. And frankly, it's a lot of fun. So typically when I'm doing something, even like something like this, where I'm sitting at a computer, I like to have my hips moving just a little bit of movement that keeps me in that state of flow. So I want to just offer that up front as something that we all have access to, no matter what we are doing, and even the most subtle movement. Right?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, for those of us who are watching this while sitting, or for me, I'm sitting here and I'm on a soft surface. And it would be very disruptive to our broadcast for me to get up to be able to move my hips. Do you have any tips about how to move when our mobility is restricted, either by what we're sitting on, or maybe if moving our hips isn't easy for us?
Yes, it's such a great question. First of all, if you can sit sometimes at the edge of the chair or back of the chair with like a pillow, like I always sit with a pillow behind me, and that keeps me upright, and I have a lot more ability to move my hips as I'm doing that. But also, you know, so much of movement is actually the energy behind it, like everything in life. Like, what is the energy that you are putting forth? So if you are in a state where you're almost imagining your body moving, you have an image of like some sort of water flowing in a circle around you. That can be enough to get that energy moving, so that even if you are not able to physically move that part of your body, you can activate the energy that moves it, so that you get the benefit of it. And really, like, our imagination is so powerful, and I'm so glad you asked this, because we're not always in a place where we can move our hips. We're not always in a place where we can, you know, do massage, or we can do physical things that are so beneficial for us, but we can internally just get into that space and imagine what it would be like. And it turns out that our muscles actually, like, scientifically, they've shown that if you are mentally and like in your imagination as if you are doing an action, the muscles respond as if you are physically doing it. So this is not just a make-believe thing. This is real, and we all can tap into it.
I'm so glad you're saying this, because some people may be wondering, if you're doing something with the hips, why aren't you standing? And as you said before we came on, it's because that's one of the restrictions of the technology. It doesn't work, as Annie said, it won't work for her for a different reason. So I really appreciate you putting in that psychological component, and the imagination it's important to use that muscle anyway, right? Yeah, great. Yeah, we definitely need, and we haven't focused on this before, self-care techniques being at the computer, or when we leave after 8 hours on the computer, which is insane, but I have friends, and sometimes me, 8 to 12 hours, you know, and all our teachings online, for example, as I'm sure this must be the case for you as well, yeah?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it's so just, you know, we're so focused on what we're doing, and to just go inward for just that second and just check in with the body and just imagine. And water is such a great image, because water is flowing. Yeah. And so, I mean, you can have that water coming through your head, going over your shoulders if you've been hunching, just to sort of imagine that, and even coming through your arms and your fingers. I mean, this is where creativity and all of the things that you would do if you were a little kid playing, you can start to put into your life. And these are the things that give us pleasure. These are those things that we naturally know how to do, that we have forgotten or we have stopped practicing. So I'm glad that we can remember these things together.
Yes. And the whole idea of also just making ourselves play, which we talked about last week. From when my grandson was a baby, and I was going to send it now that he's had babies, and I can't part with it because I love it. And just to look at it, I don't rattle it normally, but just to see it makes me smile. And yeah, but I think the physical thing is just really crucial too, because it forces that shift as well. And
that was out of here.
Otherwise, exactly. Bria, get us out of Bria. Yeah. So Annie, I can't hear you.
I'm muted. Yes, sorry. Yeah, so Cherina, on the topic of play and pleasure, we had Kohenet Lorenstein on last week, and we were talking about how are we finding play and pleasure now in this time in pandemic life. And I'm wondering, how is that for you? What's that like for you? What's working? What's working that, I mean, if you want to share what's working for you personally, and also more about the practices you're aware of that you would invite others into.
Yeah. So it's a challenging time. I mean, I'm on the East Coast in Boston. And so while I used to be able to get together with people and have more social, playful interactions outside, it's now becoming too cold to do so. And so one of the things that I've really been focusing on is, how do I still have that playful quality? How do I find pleasure when it's harder to be out in nature for long periods of time, and it's harder to have those in-person, socially distant, but in-person connections? And one of the things, besides, just being online more and, checking in with people that you love and care for, and, making sure everyone's okay, even that little bit of connection can really help. The thing that is really grounding for me and for people I work with is to really drop into your senses. And it's so simple. It seems like something that, like, why? That is so ridiculous. There's no merit to this. What do you mean senses? This is so simplistic.
Of course.
And of course, it's those simple things. It's like, what's the purpose of life? Love. No, see, that's too simplistic. Love is just not big. It's just not. And you're like, but actually, if we could actually get love, if we could really be in that state of love, the world would look different. So it's the same thing with our senses. It's sort of, we all have our senses, but how often do we let them guide us? And do we allow them to give us pleasure? Take, for example, you're going to eat.
Right.
You're going to eat, and you're going to go into the kitchen, and you're going to start preparing food. I don't know about you, but oftentimes it's like, all right, I got 20 minutes. Let me chop this. Let me get this stir fried. Let me, bake this in the oven. Boom, we're done. Let's eat it. And let's get to whatever else it is that is so, so important that we must do.
Right.
I feel like I just have to say, for those out there who are like me, generally speaking, if I have 20 minutes, I'm taking a pizza pocket or two from the freezer and putting them in the microwave, and then blessing them with divine love to get a little extra nourishment, a la Christiane Northrup. And I mean, the chopping when I'm that's not happening generally. Today, I kind of surprised myself, but usually it's like, what is fast and easy and will give me calories? Just in case there are others out there who are not cooks.
Right.
Yes.
I want to say I'm with you.
Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing. It actually doesn't matter if you're cooking a 4-course dinner or you are taking something from the freezer and popping it in the microwave or the oven, right? Because both yield an opportunity. Both yield the opportunity to be in your senses and to milk it for all it's worth. So I love that you're saying, Annie, that you're blessing your food, that you're sending all this good juice to it to just rev it up, really. So it's more nourishing for you. And that is so, so beautiful. I do that as well. And it's that type of practice, the idea of a blessing or a bracha, or just adding a little bit of extra juice to it that can really make it easier to assimilate into the body. But let's go even before that, because there can be a little shame around, oh, I'm taking something out of the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
I bought something and maybe it doesn't have the best ingredients. I mean, I tried to find the healthiest product out there, but still it's not homemade. And there can be all these ways that the mind starts to say, you're not good enough. You have failed.
Right.
Shame on you. And that gets us out of the, like, it's just this awful feeling. And then we're bringing that energy to cooking food that then is supposed to nourish us, which means that even with a blessing on top, but like underneath that blessing is a lot of schmutz. Like it's a lot of stuff that is not so healthy to ingest. And so instead of having this cycle of sort of, not great, why are you doing this? And then eating that and then doing it over and over, what about how you open the freezer? I know, opening a freezer.
I love this, it's so great. Just like slow down. What I'm hearing here is let's slow down. And I'm so excited to hear it, because Cherina, like everything you say just like oozes sensuality. How you open the freezer. Like keep going, it's so good.
Yes, well, and thank you for saying slow down, because that's really what it is about. And our senses, if we engage with them, allow us to slow down. Like that's one of the easiest ways to do it. I don't know about you, like if someone's like, you need to slow down, you need to calm down, meditate. And I'm like, well, I may be able to meditate once I calm down, once I'm, out of my head, but that's the last thing I can do is sit still right now. And so our senses are this way to get into our body, to get into that space that is responsive as opposed to reactive. And so it just takes the pressure off and it takes the stress off. So yes, it's meant to be sensual, because sensual is our senses engaged. Yeah. Right? A lot of people have a very sexual connotation to sensuality. Maybe it's taboo, but really it's simply being present with our senses. And when we do that, oftentimes what is produced is pleasure. So let's just slow this down for a second. You're opening the freezer. What does it feel like in your fingertips to touch that surface? And you can hear that compression. There's like a little seal to keep it. And then all of a sudden it comes apart. And you heard that sound. And then there's this cold breeze that kind of comes forth. Right. And you might even feel like a little chill depending on what the temperature is outside. And then you go and you look, and there are all these different things that are there. And what is calling you? What would bring you delight?
Right. I mean, this summer, you would especially feel that when you want to stand in front of an open freezer, and that's a whole other element than skin. The sense of this. Yeah.
Well, and also, what does it feel like? Because do you want to open and close the freezer as quickly as possible? How could you honor that in your body through your senses? Because sometimes it's like obvious pleasure. It's obvious, oh, I just want to stand in there, let me eat all the ice cream. Oh my gosh, this feels so good. And then in winter, like a few days ago, we had really cold temperatures. I had to get something in the freezer. And so I open it with a sense of play, this sense of, how could I just sneak in and get that? Because I don't want to linger, but how could I just sneak in and just grab that little thing? And it's really just it's an attitude. It's the way that a child would go about things. It's an intentionality. It's not hard. Everyone can do this. Yeah. And it's in the smallest way, it changes everything. Just changes everything.
I love that. Yeah, and I think spices are very much part of that. And that's how I have been cultivating more sensuality in the kitchen and learning to treat it as a sacred space, because I have, I won't say an aversion, but it took a while for me to get used to wanting to be in the kitchen for any length of time. And so I've made it into its own separate temple. There are 2 altars there now, and spices play a big role. And the other thing of what you're saying about this, the planning, the intentionality is so important. I know I've been waiting for the weekend to use a new Dutch oven. And so I'm now starting to collect and put out on the counter the beautiful onions and the potatoes that just came, and all the different ingredients. And that way it's becoming a whole other kind of process that I'm very much looking forward to. Yeah,
So beautiful.
sacralizing all these things. Yes.
Yeah.
Tied in with sensuality. I think it's inextricably linked, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, food, 100%. I think the colors and the textures, and I love, D'vorah, you described putting them on the counter. You know, last week I was talking about the food share box, and it came on Wednesday, and I thought of our conversation, because I was like, ooh, what's going to be in here? And for the first time, I cooked carrot greens, and they're really good. I roasted them with some potatoes. It's like parsley. It tastes like salty carrots. And that, just like getting to play with new foods, has been really fun.
Yeah.
And then this morning I was reminded of an eating meditation that I got to do at Pardes, 10 years ago. I was studying with Rabbi James Jacobson Maisels in a spirituality class. I don't remember the title of the class, but he had us do an eating meditation. And at that time, I was writing poetry for the Pardes blog, and I wrote a piece called Eating Slowly. And I remember he passed around some different kinds of foods, and we all took some and put them on a plate. And then so I remember clementines, I remember chocolate, I remember crackers, and like those in particular. And I was talking to a client about this exact thing this morning, and how when we talk about sensuality, which also, like, we're in the season, in Scorpio season, and in the dark, the season of dark and cozy, and so tuning into our senses. And when I bring up sensuality, often people think about what we do with our partners. And I was like, no, wait, we can be sensual by ourselves, for ourselves, with ourselves. And one easy way to do that is in our relationship with food. And then I thought of this meditation, and it was funny because I remember at the time thinking that the chocolate was going to be the thing that I was so excited about, but it was the clementine. And even just remembering, my mouth waters. Like, so we closed our eyes and we used our hands and like reached for the thing on the plate. And I remember the anticipation when my fingers touched the piece of clementine. And then, you know, it was like, bring it to your mouth really slowly, like smell it, rub it against your lips, put it in your mouth, roll it around on your tongue before you bite. And the anticipation of that squirt of juicy, tangy, sweet, still when I talk about it, it feels so sensual and so exciting. And so, you know, when I was talking about it this morning with a client, I was like, ooh, I have some oranges. I think I want to try this again. And just to think, like, what's in my fridge or freezer? And even, I really appreciate, Cherina, that you invited us to back up with whatever it is we're cooking, and to notice the feelings of, you know, if we have any shame about the pizza pocket. And I was like, if I did an eating meditation with a pizza pocket, like pizza, like the bread and the smells and the cheese and the gooey and the tomato sauce, like that is amazing. It doesn't have to be fancy food or pure food, like whatever those things mean, just like whatever. And I like pizza pockets. That's why they're in my freezer. They're a pleasure for me. Right. So to just like take full permission to have the pleasurable experience with whatever we have on hand. I feel like that is the invitation you're giving us. And I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah, and I'm glad.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I love that you said permission, because that's what so much of this is about. It's about permission to do the things we like, to be who we are, to let ourselves be expressive, and to learn what we actually desire, what we actually want. Because so much of the time, it's been stuffed away, we've been told it's not right, or we've just been focusing on other people's happiness instead of our own. And so this idea of permission is just, it's huge. And I just wanted to highlight that, Annie, because it struck a chord, because that's what half of it is all about. Once there's permission, there's space. And then, then we can really figure everything out. But we need that as that starting point.
Yeah. And that can
absolutely.
Things like, it's not quite, well, it's a little bit shame. I think it also may be embarrassment, but maybe more shame that I have this cookie addiction since before COVID. I discovered these amazing giant cookies. And as we went into the pandemic further and further, I have become completely addicted to them. I have to have them, almost every day. And so I chide myself about that a lot. And yet, when I catch myself doing that, I remind myself that to give permission also, because we are allowed to do certain things to take care of ourselves. That isn't the healthiest one, but it is a way that I nurture myself during all this, everything going on. And so, yeah, I get what you're saying, both of you, about this idea of shame. And also I want to bring in the fact that any emotion we're feeling, like if I won't go to the kitchen and cook anything if I'm angry, because I don't want to put that energy, and my partner knows he definitely doesn't want anything I hand him that's been prepared when I'm angry, and that's something I don't think people recognize. But as you're talking about sensuality, Cherina, and the emotions and the intentions that go into our food and everything leading up to putting that food in our mouth, I'm just reminded to say that.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you did. And it also reminded me of something, which is that if there's shame about that cookie, if there's sort of, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be eating it. And thank you for that example, because I think a lot of people can relate to that, whether it's a cookie or chocolate or cake or whatever it is. There's that thing that's sort of that guilty pleasure. And we say guilt because there's guilt that we put on it. There's a guilt aspect of this thing that otherwise would give us pleasure. And one of the things is that if there's that guilt or that shame associated, that infuses whatever it is you're putting inside of yourself.
Right.
Just like anger.
Right.
Yeah. And so here's the thing that we can practice, which is, what if I put something else instead? Like, what if, even if this cookie has a lot of things that really are not the healthiest thing in the world, if I infused an energy of, I'm going to enjoy every bite. I'm going to let this be a sacred cookie.
Exactly.
This is part of my pleasure practice that I do. And I'm going to take that bite, and all of that is going to nourish me. I don't have all the scientific data, and I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty certain that the way your body assimilates that cookie is going to be completely different. The way you emotionally and spiritually connect to that cookie to get that satisfaction is going to be different, because you are infusing it with a very different energy.
I love it.
Like, it's why not? Guilty pleasure. I remember saying that to someone once. They said, take the guilt out. And I kind of like, what are you talking about? It's a guilty pleasure. They said, take the guilt out.
I just brought that word up because that's really what I meant more than shame. It is absolutely a guilty pleasure, but often I delight in that too. So.
But what if it was just a delightful pleasure, a pleasurable pleasure? Like I like the idea of taking the energy of guilt out of the experience and saying, I choose this because it feels good.
Yeah.
And I'm not hurting myself, right? Like, part of it is we're conditioned, even I'm feeling some discomfort as we talk about it's not the healthiest choice. And I'm like, look, if you're someone who has some health condition and you're told don't eat cookies, it's hurting you, right? Like, that's one thing. And you're going, I'm going to eat this anyway. I mean, and even then, like, my ex has a gajillion allergies and food sensitivities. And he would say to me, sometimes the pleasure I get from this experience of having this thing I really enjoy, it supersedes whatever sensitivity that I'm experiencing. And it feels a hell of a lot better than all of the restrictions and constraints that come from having to live with all of these sensitivities. And to be honest, like sometimes that would drive me crazy because I would be cooking around his sensitivities and then it felt like he was cheating. But I actually learned something from that. So now, you know, I actually really like the invitation to say, like, we're adults. We have informed consent when it comes to what we're putting in this way, what we're choosing to prepare and put in our own bodies. And what if we just say, like, I choose this because it feels good. And I bless this, that it will feel good in all the ways and be for my highest good.
Mm-hmm. And I love what Cherina, also about, and I do this with my cookies when I get them home from the place where they bake them. I will open the bag very, intentionally, and I just breathe in the smell of them, because when they're fresh baked and they're warm, I mean, there's just nothing that compares to it. So I do enjoy every moment. And yeah, if I have some guilt, that comes some other time of the day, but not when I'm ingesting it. So, but I thank you for raising that point, because yeah, we have to have these things we enjoy. Because we are holding so much that it doesn't have to, and certainly doesn't always come in food. It takes many forms for different people, and sometimes people are watching, let's say, movies, or binging on different shows and feeling guilty about that, but it's an escape, which we also need right now, because we cannot live 24/7 in the news.
Oh, no, of course not.
Possible. Yeah.
And it's really, I heard this, and I'm trying to remember who said it first to me. I'd love to give them credit for it, but maybe they'll hear it and know it for themselves. Someone once told me that when there's something that you're feeling a little guilt, shame, fear, whatever that thing is, what it really means is that you're in resistance. There's a part of you that is in resistance and yet also wants it. And that push-pull is just a dynamic that actually can be quite pleasurable. I mean, if you really start to think about pleasure, especially when it's revving up, there's this anticipation, and it's back, and it's forth, and that is part of the fun. So let's be honest, that part of that, like, oh, but it's not that good for me, but I want it, and that can actually be incredibly pleasurable. If it's made into sort of a game, and it's made into this, I'm going to be with that without judging it. I'm just going to be in this dynamic of push-pull and just be with that. And another way to sort of say that is, can you bring the divine into this? Like, how can you just go, oh, wow, I'm going to be present with this cookie.
Yeah.
I'm going to be present with this food. I'm going to be present with this TV show that I'm watching. How can I let this just be a beautiful, sacred experience? Because who's to say it's not? Just because it's ordinary, just because it's part of pop culture, just because some dietitian said XYZ.
Right. Yeah.
Look inside and just say, okay, where's the divine in this? Let me bring that forth. And it's just another way to look at the same thing we've been talking about.
In one way, that's come through for me in the last week or so, especially, but also during October, I was doing more cooking for my ancestors. And spirit is definitely running all through that, and when it's their yard site, putting some food that they liked on the altar. So that's one way to address what you're suggesting. Yeah. It may not
I love that.
be everybody, but yeah, it is for me. Yeah.
And as for TV shows, I want to say, sometimes I do invite, I'm like, well, I used to notice, I'd be watching a show and I'd be like, oh, that was exactly the message I needed today. Like I zoned out to watch something because I was too fried. And it doesn't even have to be from the news. I mean, we're living through this collective trauma, but we're also, all of our stuff is amplified right now as we're dealing with, feeling stuck in a variety of ways in our lives. And so it could just be like, even if you're not watching the news, even if you're more isolated, just being in our own stuff all the time can be really exhausting. And that's certainly been true for me as I'm processing all kinds of whatever. And sometimes I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to zone out and watch this show. And then I'm like, oh, wow, that thing that's happening to that character or that dialogue or that scene. Like today I was watching this show, I want to say Voices on Fire. I don't know, it just launched on Netflix. And it's a reality show where this guy is building like a multicultural gospel choir. He's Pharrell Williams' uncle. His name is Pastor Ezekiel, or Deacon Ezekiel Williams. And oh my goddess, the singing. And it made me think about pleasure, because usually on these vocalists, I mean, I'm a singer, so I like, you know, Idol and The Voice, and often they want people whose voices are a very specific, particular, and somewhat restrained way. Mm. And so to see them getting like picking, interviewing or auditioning gospel singers, and looking for the unbridled, passionate, the ones who are in the yearning and in relationship with the divine. I was crying watching this. The singing was so moving. And the joke is, you know, they had 300 people to audition, and they were like, well, we're just going to have 300 people in the choir, because everybody was so good. And there was no shaming. There were, you know, people's stories, and they were held, and it was just so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, music, vocals, divine music, like all of this is part of my pleasure practice right now. And a lot of the messages that people were sharing about their lives were messages that were useful to me. So, you know, the way that I think we've talked about bibliomancy here, like when you're looking for divine messages, you can open a book. And this I learned from Rabbi Rav Kohenet Jill Hammer, and we did it with a Tanakh, a Torah, like a book of the Torah, and you open to a page, you put your finger on the line, and then you read what's there, and you get a blessing from that. Like, we can do that with TV. What blessings are available in these shows, in these movies?
Yes. Oh my, I have to jump in here, because TV is one of the ways that I actually get divine messages sent to me. And so I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think there are divine messages available everywhere in all different ways. Some people get them from other people, like you'll just hear part of a conversation and you happen to notice a sentence that someone said. It could be from a tree, it could be from food, it could be from anything. But one of the ways that I hear it is, and I'll have this thing where I'll just start watching a show and I'm going, I don't like this type of TV show. Why am I watching this? Like, this is so weird. This is not something that I enjoy. It's not even really pleasurable for me. What is going on? And I'll watch it and I'll watch it, and all of a sudden dots will connect. Mm-hmm. And I'll go, oh, that was the message. I was getting divine insight into something really important. And it's constantly available. Constantly. But there are things where we're like, oh, well, when we're meditating, that's when we receive it. When we're out in nature, you know, out in the forest, that's where we receive it. When we are in the bathtub, that's where we receive it. And it can't just be in the ordinary mundane things that we do every single day. And that's the message I'm taking from this. And it's something that I also practice, which is stop relegating pleasure, divine inspiration, beauty, love, joy, all these things to certain categories and spaces in your life. Right. Let it expand and start just being curious about where else it might show up, because it will. And then life becomes so much more magical.
True. We just have to remain open to it. Yeah. We just have to be able to hear it.
Yeah. And part of the hearing is taking the judgment out of the things you do, right. Taking the judgment and all of that, because that's what, it's something that I talk to people a lot about. It constricts the body, because we hold those judgments, we hold trauma, we hold emotions in our physical being. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to hear those divine voices, that intuition, get all of the pleasureful experiences, we have to actually work on the things that are in the physicality already that are not making room for all of this. And so part of it is just this, you know, getting out of that judgment and learning tools and being able to open up enough that there's this new stuff that can come in that is just so much more aligned and feels better and can kind of guide in life.
Mm. Beautiful. Well, that sounds like a wonderful point at which to depart. I know we could do this for another hour, and I always hate to close, but we're getting near time. So Annie, I just want to ask if you have any last things.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to add in, as Cherina's inviting us to be present and releasing those feelings of guilt and shame that are constraining us. When we open to see what we feel, sometimes feelings that are hard might show up first. And it feels important to acknowledge that grief and fear and sadness and anger, those things might show up in sensations and in emotions in our bodies. And I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us when we say we're not suggesting that you skip that and go straight to pleasure. We're inviting you to feel what you feel and make room for all of it to move through and flow through. And we need all of it. Like when we allow ourselves to feel and express and move our bodies in all of the feelings, we get the anger and the excitement and the fear and the exuberance and the sadness and the joy, all of the sides of those coins. And the more comfortable we can be with feeling all the feelings, the more open we can be to experiencing all the feelings, including pleasure and joy and comfort and ecstasy, all of it.
That's such a good point, Annie, and thank you for raising it, because when we do something, especially something sensual or something like dancing or singing, chanting, definitely it can tap first into grief, deep grief. I'm finding that lately. And if we don't let that through, the other can't come through, the joyous moments. So really,
Exactly.
thank you so much for bringing that up. It's easy to forget about because we don't want to think about it. Yeah, absolutely. And when I try to do that, it just bites me and says,
Yes, if I can just say that that's part of the not judging, is not judging having those emotions and those feelings, and to allow a sacred space to be surrounding those feelings, and to also ask for support if you need.
Right.
These are not things to just go through alone. We need each other. We need support systems. And it is okay to feel different ways and to ask for someone to be there for you.
It's critical, I think, that last piece. Critical. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
D'vorah, do you want to just say, what did you mean when you try to do that, it bites you? Can you finish that thought?
Try to suppress the grief or the rage, which I certainly have. Many of us are having now. And there are days I try to just push that down and move on with my day. And eventually, a few days later, it catches up in some fashion. So, and this is nothing new. It's just more intense right now for all of us. Right? And yeah, maybe we could get away with doing that in normal, whatever normal times were, and not so normal. And now I think even much less so. Our brains and our bodies can't and won't and shouldn't tolerate that, that pushing aside. And so you're talking about, it's often phrased as the light and the dark, right? And the shadow, and yetzer hara, yetzer hato, always, being able to accept both sides of ourselves. And it is so important. I recently learned, actually, in the last couple of years, that yetzer hara isn't just about some evil impulse that makes you lustful. It's also the energy that helps you build, that helps people build a house or create. So that just came in. So it's maybe not entirely relevant here, but certainly in terms of judging ourselves and what Cherina was talking about in that way. To not regard that as a negative, or even to do it, not even to do it, but that's not always possible, right? But I think the more we mirror for each other non-judgment, maybe the more we're able to do it for ourselves, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that thing about not being able to do it alone, right? So we look for people who can be our positive mirrors and our collaborators and supporters in this work of being present in our whole selves, holy whole selves,
Yes.
With all of the potential experiences, all of the potential experiences that enable us to be our holy whole selves.
Yes.
And so this group right here on this screen of folks who are engaging with this process of presence and presencing and priestessing, presencing. So we get to have pleasure in these conversations, and we're modeling for those who are watching. You too can have pleasurable conversations with folks you vibe with. With us, feel free to reach out, and with your people. And we certainly encourage that too.
Yeah. So one thing we did last time was talk about how people can reach us. And Cherina, do you want to say a way folks can reach you?
Sure. So I'm actually redoing my website right now, but it is hotpinktorah.com. And there's a place for you to just put in your contact information. So when there are new classes and opportunities to connect, I will be able to reach out and make those connections. And also on social media, it's Cherina Eisenberg, Facebook and Instagram. And I would love to hear from you and continue the conversation. This is my passion in life, and I would love to share more of it with you.
That definitely shines through you. Thank you. And Annie?
Yeah, well, you're probably, if you're seeing this video, you found me on Facebook. And so it's Kohenet Annie Matan is my page. And you can go there and see all of the past, I think all of the past Priestessing the Priestesses episodes are available there. I'm Kohenet Annie Matan. I'm Annie Matan, like at Annie Matan on Instagram, and my website is anniematan.com. And D'vorah.
And mine is also, yes, if you see this this broadcast on Lilith Institute on Facebook, then you'll also know how to message me, but also through lilithinstitute.com. My website, there's now a place to sign up for my newsletter and or just to reach out if you have questions about today or comments. Yeah. So many thanks. Do you want to close us out, Annie?
Just thanks so much, Cherina, for joining us, and I'm excited. I actually kind of want to do the thing that I do in my in Living from the Heart, which is to ask how are each of us feeling in this moment, and what's one thing we're taking away from this conversation. For me, I'm feeling inspired, and I'm really I'm taking away the playfulness with the freezer, and that that's sneaky. Like, how do I ooh, okay, the relationship, let's take it back a step. I'm really resonating and enjoying that.
Honestly, I am feeling inspired and hopeful by having conversations like this. It really lights me up. And the thing I'm taking away is this sense that it's funny, like this activity I do with people as well. I'm just seeing the overlap. Like, we all have our ways that we interact with the same things. We're all going towards this one, like, we're all in the same direction. We all care. We all want to see a better world. And that is what I'm really taking away, that we all have our own ways, and different people resonate with different ways, which is why we all need to be here and to be sharing. But we're all in that same direction. And so we are partners in it. And that is truly beautiful to me.
Great. I'm feeling excited also and grounded by this conversation, and really looking forward actually to now going back into my kitchen and seeing what I select, and if that will be different, or if I will come up with some new inventions I haven't thought of before for the Dutch oven mixture, whatever that will manifest as tomorrow afternoon. And I will be thinking of both of you as I do that preparation, and want to thank you again, Cherina, and wish you both peace and health and centeredness, chesed, and all the chokhmah you have, all the wisdom you hold, each of you inside. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.